but there may have been other reasons. My job for most of the time I was at Bell Labs was managing the behavioral and acoustical research departments. And these were peopled with experimental psychologists and physicists and some engineers, mostly electrical engineers, and some computer scientists. I always felt that my job was to try to recruit people who seemed both very smart and who seemed interested in problems that were broadly related to the work of the Bell system, to communications. But when I say broadly, we could study how the human ear worked physiologically, and even try to deduce how the cortex worked, to understand such things as masking of one sound by another in speech or in music. And so we could support basic research in these areas. So I always tried to find people that I thought were both smart and interested in useful problems. But then I would explain to them that when they came, they would have to choose their own work, and that we were not going to hand them a problem to work on, and they both had to be able to recognize useful problems and to make some progress on them, or eventually we would figure someplace else for them to work. So that my job was more or less finding the right people and then letting them alone to do their thing, and then finding out what they had accomplished and understanding what they had done. And so, amongst other things, this left me a certain amount of time to do my own work.
Great environment for creativity and innovation.
Yes.
I think that sort of environment is perfect for smart people to come up with smart things. I noticed also Vishnu Atal was there, and LPC.
Right.
Obviously that has been used a lot by composers, Charles Dodge and Paul Lansky. Have you had any collaboration with Vishnu Atal?
Oh yes. In fact, the most interesting paper that I was involved with in the speech area was with Vishnu and Gigi Chang and John Tukey, a very well-known statistician. And
is that the Tukey in the short time Fourier transform? Tukey?
Yes, that's the Tukey-Cooley algorithm,
right,
which I think still is important. Anyway, the question was, in recognizing speech, it would be useful, or people thought it would be useful, if you could take the spectrum of the sound and from that spectrum deduce the shape of the vocal tract, because we did know how shape was related to the P's and B's and A's and O's and so forth. And that research seemed to be always problematic. And so the four of us decided that maybe the problem was not soluble. And this is basically what we call the ventriloquist paper. And it proved that you can make speech sounds which are absolutely indistinguishable by the human ear with very different configurations of the vocal tract. And indeed, we synthesize the sound with the most important thing in sounds are the positions of the three lowest resonances, the three formats. And so we would synthesize the sound with those three formats with a given configuration of the vocal tract, and then we would gradually change the configuration, but with the constriction that the first three formats would not change. And we had a program to do that. Gigi Chang wrote the program, and you could make a progression of small changes which resulted in a very big change. And so this essentially said that the amount of information in the sound wave isn't sufficient to specify the shape of the vocal tract, and you'll need more information if you want to do that precisely. And that was the last paper that I did on involving speech work, and that was with Vishnu.
Right. Also, I noticed that just reading books and whatnot, Flanagan was also at Bell Labs.
That's right.
And he did a lot of research with the phase vocoder.
Yep.
And I'm wondering if you had anything to do with the phase vocoder or research with Flanagan.
Yeah. No, I never did any direct research with Flanagan, but we were in the same area for a long time, and I know him very well. And I didn't work with the phase vocoder either.
One particular person that keeps popping up is also Joan Miller.
Oh yes,
and
yeah.
I was wondering if you could perhaps talk about her a little bit.
Well,
her contribution.
She was a close associate of mine, and we did a number of researches together. She studied at Berkeley and had a advanced degree in statistics, but she too liked the computer as a device, and she was a very good programmer, and she could use this in her research. And she did some of the most complicated code in the Music 5 program. This was the code to interpret the numbers on the IBM punch cards, the P fields, put them in the right place. We worked on speech coding for a while. She did a little bit of work on music, but not too much. She got very interested in learning to play a violin as a professional violinist, and did that. And then after she retired, she's kept on playing violin in various professional groups around New Jersey. And she's one of the people that I always try to see when I go back to New Jersey. In fact, we often get together for playing something.
I was wondering what sort of collaboration you had with Cage.
Cage.
Couldn't read too much on that.
Yeah. Well, let's see, there were two main collaborations. Cage envisioned a piece for an orchestra where all the musicians would have contact microphones, and they would come into a big mixer. Originally he hoped to have one a loudness control for each musician, but we ended up as a compromise. I built the mixer for him, really an octopus of wires.
What year was this?
We'll have to look that up, but I would guess it was 72 or 73, something like there. Anyhow, the New York Philharmonic programmed the piece, and let's see, actually, maybe it was earlier than that, because Jim Tenney was at Bell Labs then, and the mixer had enough knobs at it so that Cage wanted someone else to help him conduct the piece, and so Tenney and Cage were joint conductors at the mixer, and so they could set the levels of sound, and they could route the sound to one or several of about 8 or 10 loudspeakers that were positioned all around the hall. The piece had problems. The first problem was Leonard Bernstein, the music director, and he came in after the rehearsals were well along and told the musicians if they didn't want to put contact microphones on their instruments, they didn't have to. That infuriated me because the piece depended on that, and also because I had thought rather carefully about this problem, and I had previously suggested that the instruments not be their number one instrument, but one of their lesser instruments, and most violinists have several instruments. And I had arranged the contact microphones to be attached to the bridges of the instruments, and bridges have to be replaced every now and then. The original Stradivarius bridges are, I think, no longer with any instrument, and so that the contact mics were unlikely to produce permanent damage to any instruments. And the brass players and the most of the other players were quite happy to have contact mics taped onto their instruments, or however they were attached. So I was about to resign, take my mixer with me, and say forget about all this crap. Anyhow, Cage saved the day by inviting me and my assistant up to a nice restaurant, and Austrian restaurant in New York City, and fed us a soccer torta, and this cheered us up enough to come back. But the piece really had problems. Cage again rose to the occasion, and he added a piano piece to the program, Atlas Ellipticalis, I think, that was played by his favorite pianist, whose name will come back to me in a moment. But the other problem with the piece was that we had not counted on the feedback to the stage from the loudspeakers. It was really bad for people sitting near the loudspeakers, and so I felt badly about the sound levels that I subjected some of the people to. But anyway, I certainly enjoyed working with Cage. He would come out and visit us, and we occasionally went for walks in the woods behind our house. He would look for mushrooms, and I asked him if he ever ate random mushrooms, and he said absolutely not. That he knew what would happen under those circumstances. The other interaction with him, he had been using the I Ching as a way of generating